was trying to think of ASMR videos that would be, relaxing, and I thought this would be perfect. So I'm going to move my candle to the side. Before we get started, don't forget to like and subscribe, and yeah, I hope you enjoy. So I'm going to be reading Under the Eagle by Simon Scarrow. Let's get started in the reading. It's no good, sir, the bastard's well and truly stuck. The centurion leaned back against the wagon and paused for breath. Around him a saw of bone weary legionaries stood up to their waist in the foul-smelling ooze of the marsh. From the edge of the track, the general followed their efforts in growing frustration. He had been embarking onto one of the evacuation ships when news arrived that the wagon had run off the narrow path. He had immediately taken one of the few remaining horses and galloped it back through the marsh to investigate the situation at first hand. Weighed down by the heavy chest resting on its bed, the wagon resisted every effort to wrestle it free. There was no further help available now since the rear guard had finished loading and put to sea. Only the general, these men, and a thin screen of the last remaining cavalry scouts stood between the wagon and the army of Caswellan, snapping at the heels of the erstwhile Roman invaders. I'm just going to take a sip of my hot chocolate. The general let slip an oath, and his horse raised its head in alarm from the nearby corpse where it had been tethered. The wagon was lost then, that much was evident, and the chest itself was too heavy to carry back. To the last ship waiting at anchor, for security's sake, the key to the chest had remained with the quartermaster, now well out to sea, and the chest was so constructed as to make it impossible to open without the right tools. "What now, sir?" the centurion asked. The general looked long and hard at the chest. In silence, there was nothing he could do, nothing at all. Wagon, chest, and contents were not going to move. For a moment, he dared not contemplate that, since the loss of the chest would set his political plans back by a year at least. In that agonizing moment of indecision, a war blew close at hand. With terrified expressions, the legionaries started to wade back towards their weapons lying on the track. "Stay where you bloody are," the general roared. "I haven't ordered you to move." The legionary paused, even with the enemy close at hand. Such was the depth of their awe and respect for their commander. With a last look at the chest, the general nodded as he made his decision. "Centurion, get rid of the wagon. was a new triumphant edge to their war cries, and a cold finger of dread traced its way down the spines of the Romans. Ready javelins, the centurion called out, and his men he hefted their throwing spears back, waiting for the order. In the mist, the sound of their pursuers swept towards them, unseen and terrifying. Then, in distant grey shapes appeared a short way off. Release! The javelins arched up and out of sight and crashed down on the reckless Breton with a chorus of screams from both man and beast. Form up, the centurion cried out. At the command, quick march. The small column stepped out down the track towards the distant safety of the last evacuation ship. The centurion marching at their side, keeping an anxious watch on the mist that swallowed up the track behind them. The volley of javelins did not delay the Britons for long, and soon the sound of hooves closed in on them, against slower and more cautious this time. The centurion heard a thud, and one of his men gasped in pain. He turned to see an arrow shaft protruding from the back of the rearmost legionary, fighting for breath as his lungs filled with blood. This is quite gruesome, I'm sorry. The man fell to his knees and toppled forward. At the drop, the belts and harshness of legionaries jingled as they quickened their pace and tried to increase the distance between themselves and their invisible pursuers. More arrows wired out of the mist, fired blindly at the Romans. Still, some found their mark, and one by one the column shrank in size as men fell on the track and lay, swords drawn, grimly waiting for the end. By the time the centurion reached the final rise where the marsh gave way to sand and pebble, only 4 men remained with him. The faint sound of seashore was the music of hope to their ears, and a slight September breeze worked to thin the mist ahead of them. All at once, the path ahead was clear. 200 paces away from the shingle, a small boat waited in the surf. A little way out to sea, a Tremere lay at anchor in a gentle swell, and far out towards the horizon, the dark specks of the invasion fleet were fading into the gloom of dust. Run for it, shouted the centurion, throwing down his shield and sword. Run! The shingles scattered beneath their feet as they sprinted down towards the boat. Immediately the war horn sounded behind them as the Britons also caught sight of the sea, spurring their horses on to run down the surviving men before they could reach safety. Teeth gritted, the centurion hurled himself down the gentle slope, grimly aware of the sounds of their pursuers closing in rapidly, but he dared not look back for fear that it might cause him to slow his pace. He could see a tall figure standing in the rear of the boat, desperately urging him on, as the general's red cloak rippled out behind him in the gentle breeze. 50 feet to go, and a sharp cry came from just behind him as one of the Britons thrust his spear through the rearmost legionary, with every fibre of his body screaming out for life. Let me turn the page. Screaming out for life, the centurion bounded across the wet sand at the sea's edge, splashed through the surf and hurled him over the bows of the boat. Eager hands grabbed him under the shoulders and bodily pulled him down. An instant later, a legionary crashed down on top of him, scratching his breath for the sea air. A pair of the general's burly bodyguards jabbed their spears at the pursuers, who had reined in at the water's edge. Now the odds has been evened, but they were already too late, and the boat quickly moved into deeper water as the oarsmen bent themselves to their work, rowing the boat back to the safety of the tree. This is what as the maps are good as I could make in the time we had. Well done, Centurion, well done. I'll have that now. As the Centurion handed over the tablet, he glanced around and saw that only one man had escaped with him. Only one. On the shrinking shoreline, he could see a shore of horsemen clustered around another of his men, foolish enough to be taken alive, and the Centurion shuddered at the thought of what terrors lay in wait for the helpless legionary. Every man in the boat watched in silence until finally the general spoke. "Welcome back, men, welcome back. And when we do, I promise you that we'll make those bastards regret the day they ever took up arms against Rome. I, Carus Julius Caesar, swear this on my father's grave."